Good morning everyone, my name is Ruth King and I'm the Event and Marketing Coordinator here at Hornbill. I'd like to welcome and thank you for joining today's webinar where we'll be having a presentation on Supportworks Updated Self-Service with Dave Hodgen, Product Owner, and Steve Goldthorpe, Application Developer here at Hornbill. Just to inform you, delegate audio will be muted during the presentation to help facilitate flow and timekeeping. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the GoToMeeting questions facility on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll collate questions and answer them at the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for taking the time to attend. I will now pass you over to Dave and Steve.
Good morning and welcome to the Updated Self-Service webinar. I'm going to start with taking you through some of the features which we're going to demo, and after that I'll hand over to Steve to give you actual sort of a practical run through of what we're doing. These are the features we've got in so far. There are others coming on their way, but this is what we've got present to show you. We've got fresh modern UI, which will be that working on different devices, including a mobile device. It will work as a browser within your mobile and get the your customers to be able to use that on different devices. We'll view and update various requests, follow through some self-service wizards, and also take you through a little bit of the company branding as well, that method to be able to put your own touch on it, to make it a bit more personal to your company, to your organization, and change some of the color schemes, the logos, etc. within that as well. So I'll hand over to Steve now. He'll take you through the demonstration, and then towards the end, obviously any questions, feel free to ask them within the system. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you now.
Good morning everyone. My name is Steve Goldthorpe, Application Developer at Hornbill. The webinar title, Updated Self-Service, that was slightly misleading because it's not an updated self-service, it's brand new from the top. So we will head in and we'll just log out and start from the top. So this is the new self-service portal logon page. From here you can see it's very different to the existing one. The page you can see, we can actually apply some branding to this logon page, obviously customize it for your own organization. So you can see the logo in the top left hand corner of the page is customizable, as are the self-service portal title and the subtitle and the image that sits behind. So when we're logging into self-service, if you currently use single sign-on in your organization, that also does work with the new self-service as well. The configuration in Apache is exactly the same, and the configuration from self-service is very similar. In fact, it's a lot more straightforward because you're not having to go into the code anymore. So I'll log you straight in from the login page as a customer. So as you can see, this is the landing page. This is the home page of the new web self-service. So from the top we have the navigational bar up on the top of the page, where these buttons here take you to various areas of the system. The buttons across the top are dynamically added to the page, so if a customer of yours doesn't have access to view requests or view authorizations, then they will not have these buttons up at the top of the page. So those are the buttons across the top. We've got a logout button, profile button, etc. In the home page itself, we've got some buttons down here which actually take you to various areas of the application as well. So we can go to the services page, we can go and view and update our requests from here. We can have a look at raising a new support request using a self-service wizard. Or we can take us straight to the Knowledgebase search. As per this demonstration, the Knowledgebase is still under development, so we won't be looking at that today. But all the other areas we will be doing. So underneath those buttons we've got a couple of other panes as it stands. We've got the portal information, which is the same as the welcome information on the existing self-service portal. So that information is specified, so this information here is specified as part of your self-service instance configuration. We've got a list of favourite services. Now these are services as in the services that a customer is subscribed to, and the customer has gone into the services pane and manually added these as favourites that they use regularly. So depending on your customer who logs in, they could have a very different list of services listed here. You can see some white space down here, but we intend to fill this white space with a list of recent requests, and possibly a couple of graphs, and these are all going to be customizable depending on your instance. So that's the home page. What I'll do is I'll show you how, because the application is all written in modern web design, the pages that you're going to see today are all completely responsive. So they will look as good on this device as it would on a mobile device or on a tablet device. So what I'll do is I'll just take you through how the home page will look through different devices, and I'll just use the Chrome developer tools to show you that. So this is how the home page would look on an iPad in landscape mode and in portrait mode. The one thing to note from portrait and landscape mode on an iPad would be the layout of the buttons up at the top of the page. So you can see the buttons, rather than having text, the text is removed and the icons are made larger, and so that they fit on the page properly rather than all being squashed in. If you move your iPad and have it in portrait mode, then you can see that the buttons are extended out, the size of the icons are shrunk, and you've got some text on there as well. There's also some changes to the page itself, so if we just shrink that down, you can see the buttons are all gone from 4 across to 2 across. The portal information sits underneath, and then the services sit underneath that as well. And if we take it onto an even smaller device, so if we say the iPhone 6, you can see the page responds accordingly. So you've got your buttons across, you've got one deep buttons, so you've got all your buttons there, all your content's still there. The menu up at the top is all put into the nav bar up at the top. So you click the button and it gives you all of your menu options as you would have on a full screen device. So that's the home page, and we'll just take you back to the full screen home page. So yeah, as I said, they're your buttons, your portal information, and your favourite services. One thing to note on favourite services, you've got a search bar here. So if we start entering some text into the search bar, it will filter the favourite services even smaller, because the favourite services, as it stands, we're displaying in your top 6. But if you want to find something that's on a different page, then we can just start typing in accordingly. So if I was to put in desktop, for instance, I can see I've got a desktop application of Microsoft Office there as a favourite service. And if I type in new, I can see everything that's got new in the title, in the class, or in the description of the service. So that's the services search. You'll notice we've got some buttons on here as well. This is to allow us to log Wizard generated requests against that particular service you click on, but we'll come back to that. Okay, so the next page I'm going to demonstrate is the request page. So if we have a look here, we can see the new request page. From the top, we have got a list of tabs, and these tabs are dependent on the customer who's logged into the system. It's their set of web flag permissions in the Supportworks records. So this particular customer I'm logged in as is a manager, so hence we've got my team's requests. They've also got access to site requests and organisation requests. This customer doesn't have access to related organisation requests, but if they did, we would have an additional tab across the top here that says my related organisation requests. So that's the tabs. Directly underneath the tabs we've got a search well. Now the search well allows us to filter the list of requests that we see and to paginate the list of requests. So as default we have all active requests viewed of all request types. Now this is the call class from Supportworks. So incident, service requests and change requests are visible through self-service. And we've got a search field as well. Now the search field functions exactly the same as the one on the previous page, on the services page. So if we have a look at, for instance, if I wanted to look at printer issues, then I would type printer in there, and all requests that are currently active of all request types with printer in either the summary or the description would be returned to me in that list. I could also filter by closed requests, for instance, anything that's been cancelled, or I can actually go in and return all requests if I want to search all requests that I have logged. If we go back into active requests, there's also pagination here as well, so it returns 10 records per list of requests. That's customizable within the config files within the self-service config, and the information in the table, the columns are also customizable, as are the request details page. So we'll take a look at some of these requests now. So if I click on the top one, is a service request. We can see as soon as I click on that service request, I get some request details up here. It's the problem profile and a description preview. As I said, these columns and everything that's listed in here is entirely driven by a single configuration file per tab that you're selecting across the top. So you can actually have within site requests, say, we can see we've got a customer column in here, and if we go into my requests, I can see that customer column has disappeared. It's entirely due to the config. So, and if I select incident, for instance, then I can see I get the different problem profile and different description preview there as well. Now, when we're looking at this page on a smaller device, if we just take us straight to the device view again, we can see on an iPhone we have a very different display against the requests. So if we scroll down, we can see rather than having a table full of information, which is going to be very difficult to render and be useful on a mobile device, we've rendered each of the requests as a tiny panel with the icon there displaying to tell us what the class of the request is, plus the class underneath, the request reference, the request status, and a short description. So this is the summary description from the Supportworks ITSM request pages in your main client. So we can see we've got all of the requests in there that we've got there, and again all the filters work exactly the same. So if I was to put office in there, you can see, well, we've got on all active requests. If I put in printer, we can see we've got a couple of printer issues that are currently open. And again, if I was to change my device onto an iPad, we can see we get a table again, but the side panel, which would take up some of the space on the page, has been removed to make it easier and all the information that be on the screen look nice and be more useful. So we'll just go back to the main view. So that's the requests view. So what we'll look at now is we'll take a quick look at the request page themselves. So if within the request view, we can double click on any of these requests and it will take us to the details of the request. So we can see this service request, it shows us a few panels in here. We've got at the top, this is the update panel, and the update panel is only visible under certain circumstances. So if the request is in an open status, an active status, so the request isn't cancelled or closed, then we'll get the update panel, and we will only have the update panel visible if the customer who's logged in has the particular permission to be able to update requests within Web Self-Service against their customer record in Supportworks. So that's the update panel. We'll come back to that one in a moment. Underneath there, we've got a number of tabs. So the diary, self-explanatory, is the call diary. So these are all of the call diary entries that have got a public visibility marked against them. So in here we've got the time and date stamp, we've got who actually put the request update on, we've got the body of the request, and in the top right hand corner, if there's an update type on there, then we get this populated as well. So in this instance, the first one there was a general update. We've got a components tab. The components tab is only visible on service requests, and I'll come to the incident equivalent shortly. So in the components tab, these are all components that are associated to the service that has been logged, the service request has been logged against. So we can see the components in there. This particular service request is a new starter, so we can see for a new starter service, all of these optional or mandatory components were selected at the point of login. And we've got an attachments tab as well. There's no file attachments that are visible on this particular request at the moment, but we'll go through and we'll add some, and you can see how that gets populated. So on the right side of the view, we have the request details. So we've got some custom site organization information. We've got the category, so that's your problem profile essentially from Supportworks. We've got a description preview, which is the first 255 characters of the request, the initial request raised text. We've got some status information, so the status of the request, the SLA, the priority, who it was logged by, who currently owns it, and the support group who currently owns the request. And we've got some more detailed SLA information in there. So we've got the date the request was logged, when the request should have been responded by, and when the request should be fixed by. So that's essentially the information that you've been provided on there. So we'll go to the update pane up at the top. Within the update pane, you can see at the very top, this is the rating control. Now, within the existing Supportworks self-service call details pages, we have a tab which allows the customer to rate what they think of this particular request, so how we are doing with this request. In the existing self-service, that took up quite a lot of the page, and we had quite a lot of information, quite a lot of text against it, which isn't really relevant within modern web design. So what I've done is I've included all of that right down into one control. So if the customer can come in here and say, actually, I think you're doing brilliantly with this request, they can go on and select how many stars they want to give the request, and then they can put any comments against that as well. So I think this is brilliant. And the hit rate, and you can see we get a nice message up in the top right hand corner to say that you've rated the request successfully. The diary entry gets amended, so you can see this table down here gets refreshed, and we see that the customer's rating for this request was changed to positive, and they've left that comment, and the comment stays in there as it does in the existing tool. So that's rating the request. The customer can then go and say, actually, I think it's a bit rubbish now. This is a bit rubbish. They can again rate that request, and you can see the rating change was changed to negative, and the customer's left the comment, I think it's a bit rubbish. So that's rating requests. Directly underneath there we have updates to requests. So a customer can go in and give you extra information on a particular request, as they can in the existing self-service. What we've done, I should have probably mentioned, is rather than having all of this information on separate tabs as it is in the current self-service, we've put all this on the same page to make the process of going in, checking your requests and updating your requests flow much easier for your customers. So this particular customer is going to say, I have an additional file that may be helpful. So this customer's gone in, they've got a file that they want to attach to the request. They want to put an update on the request to say, look, we've got this file, this may help you in agreeing with this service request or fixing your incident. So we'll put the update text in there, we click the attach files button, and you get a file open dialog. And what we can do, rather than in the existing self-service, you can only select one file to be attached. In this, we can select up to 5. So I'm going to select these 3 images. There are 2 images in a PowerPoint. And I'll click open. We'll get a table with the file size and the file name. So these are all the files that we're going to attach. So if I hit apply update now, you can see the update gets applied to the request. We can see we've got that update there. It was attached, it was applied by the self-service. It's a general update, and there's the time and date stamp there as well. So now if we go into the attachments tab, we can see those 3 files that we've just attached to the request. The files that are attached to the request that you have visibility of, we can then actually download. So if I hit that JPEG there, you can see it downloads as a standard file download within your browser. So if we open up that now, then you can see that's the file that I just attached to the request. So that's file attachments and updates. With it being the call class of this request being a service request, you can see that we have a cancel request button here. The cancel request button isn't visible on incidents or change requests because customers are not allowed to request that their incident or change request is cancelled. They can request that it be closed, but we'll come to that shortly. So if this customer decides, actually I don't want this new starter anymore, this new starter is not going to go ahead, then they can request a cancellation against this particular service request. So this person will no longer be starting. They can hit the cancel request button. You can see we get another call diary update against the request, which is customers requested to cancel the call. This person will no longer be starting. So this is the bit of text we added in the update pane. You can see the update type of the request is cancel call. And with having an update type of cancel call, then you can have some business process, excuse me, or a VPMing script or whatever, pick that up and then process the request accordingly. So yeah, so then your analyst will know that that request needs to be cancelled. They can go and follow whatever process, or as I say, you can automate that with BPM or VPMA. So that's the service request view. If we just have a quick look at the request list and go and have a look at an incident and see how that differs. Okay, so the incident page, you can see we've got a different icon in the top left-hand corner. This is the incident icon rather than the service request icon. We still have ability to be able to update requests, so we've got the update pane. The differences on this page is rather than having a cancel request button, we've got a request closure button. Now the request closure button is controlled by the customer permissions against the customer record in Supportworks. So if they don't have permission to be able to request the request closure, then that button won't exist. The other difference is we've got an affected items tab rather than a components tab. Now the affected items are essentially any affected CIs or services that have been raised against the incident or change request. The affected items tab also appears on the change requests. So you can see for this incident, we've got an issue with Outlook for this particular customer. So the two affected items are the email service, and we've got the customer's notebook there as well, which is also affected. But aside from that, the form is exactly the same, and I'll just show you the request closure. So I need to close this, please. So the customer wants to close the request. They can hit the request closure button. You can see they get the message up at the top to say that it's been updated. The update is applied in the call diary tab down at the bottom to say that they want to close it, and we've got an update type of close call. So then again, your analysts can go in and say the customer wants to close this, and then they can do whatever they need to do in your internal processes. So that's the request details page. The other tab at the top, we've got authorization. So if we take a look at the authorizations tab, so this looks very much like the request details page. Again, the tables within these tabs and the request details pane are all configurable via config files on your server. And the information that's presented here, obviously you can add and remove columns as you see fit. So we've got two particular tabs in here. One thing to know is next to the authorizations button at the top of your page, we have a little button here that tells us how many requests are awaiting our authorization. So that's currently 3. And as you can see, when we go into the page itself, we've got 3 requests that are awaiting our authorization. So we've got 3 new starters to authorize. If we have a look at pending your manager's authorization, this list is all requests that have been logged against me as a customer, but are awaiting authorization from my direct line manager. So if I've requested something and my line manager needs to authorize it, I would be able to see these requests here, and I could use that list to give my manager a bit of a G-up to authorize any requests that are outstanding. So if I have a look at one of these requests, so we've got 3 requests here, and we'll just choose the top one. So it takes us again to the request details page. The one glaring difference in here is we've got a new pane that's appeared at the top, and it's highlighted to say that this is an authorization that we need to apply. So in this instance, the text here up at the top of the pane, at the top of the panel, and the text here is from the workflow itself. So it takes the information from the workflow, the request stage of the workflow, and presents it to the customer who's making the authorization. So then your manager, your authorizer, whoever it is, can go in and say, actually, we'll read this. This is great. The information's all as I expected. I'm going to authorize this. Where's this request? So they put in the authorization text, they choose their authorization decision, and they hit the apply authorization decision button. When that button is hit, you can see we get a message up there to say that the authorization decision has been applied successfully. And we can see the authorization pane disappears because we no longer need to authorize it. The call diary entry is to say that the request has been authorized, and we get the text in there that the customer has added. If you've got BPM workflows to move your stages on from an authorization stage to any other stages, then once the customer does this, then those stages will move on accordingly depending on what you've got set in your particular system. So once we've authorized a request, we can see we've actually only got 2 authorizations left to do now. So if I hit that page again, we can see that we've got these 2 left to do. So if I look at this one and say, actually, there's not enough information on this, or we don't want this to be authorized, I'm going to reject this one. So we'll say this is rejected. So I reject this request authorization. And I'll hit the apply authorization decision, and you can see that the counter goes down. We get the nice message up here that tells us that it's been set successfully. We get the message down here to say that the request has been rejected, and the panel disappears again. So we can see we've now got 1 authorization. So if I decide, actually, I want my manager to authorize this one, we can again pass the request to my manager and say, I don't have the authorization to authorize this, and apply authorization decision, and again we get the message, the call diary entry, the panel disappears, and it says we've passed it to my manager, Alan C. And you can see because now we've got no authorizations left to do, the authorizations button disappears off the page. So that's request authorizations in a nutshell. So back to the home page, there's a couple more things that we need to look at today. So we'll have a look at services next, and then we'll follow that on nicely with the request wizards. So if we have a look at the services page, so this is the services page as it currently stands. This will be changed. This is still in development, obviously. We can see it takes you to any of your favourite services initially. So these are all the services that are listed as my favourite as the customer that I'm logged in as. So we've got 6 services there, and we've got pagination up at the top. So the search well up at the top, we can search for services that we're looking for against this particular filter. And again, the pagination and the services list will be filtered accordingly. The other information on here, so we've got my favourites, we've got my services. So my favourites are services that I'm subscribed to and I've marked as my favourite. My services are all the services that I'm subscribed to either as a customer, as a department or as an organisation. Services I own and add services are still under development, but these would be services that I own as services that I own as a business owner of a service. And add services will show you services that I can actually subscribe to. So services that I'm not using at the minute, but I can actually subscribe to, and we'll be putting some logic in there for that as well. So the display of the services, so if we look at my services, we've got the name of the services, we've got the category of the service, and when we click on these services, we get some information over on the right hand side. This will be populated further, but this is what we've got in there at the moment. So we can have a look at the service description and any features that are listed against that particular service. From the services, you can see we've got some images down the left hand side. These are basically a font with images in that will be giving you access to be able to select. So rather than having old-fashioned JPEGs in there to display an image against your service, we're going to let you use fonts because they're scalable, they look better on all devices, and it's just a whole lot more modern. So that's your services list. We've got a couple of buttons depending on if we've got access to be able to raise requests, and depending on what the service subscription is set to, whether we can log an incident or a request against the service, we get a different set of buttons here. So for instance, this standard desktop applications, I've got access to raise requests, so the buttons appear, and within that particular service, it's marked as being able to log an incident and a service request. And the heart next to the buttons allows the customer to easily select favourites and deselect favourites. So if I want to say, actually, I want standard desktop applications to be a favourite, we can see the heart is empty at the moment. The ones that are red are obviously favourites that we've already selected. So if I select that heart there, we can see the heart goes red, and that's one of my favourites. So if we're going back into my favourites list, I can see standard desktop applications is listed there. And if I say, actually, I don't want that to be appearing in my favourites, I'll take the ticket, I'll take the heart out, and I can see it's no longer in my favourites. And when I go back to the home page, you can see that is not in my favourites there. So if I go back into services, so that's adding and removing favourites from your services list. This will be really useful for your customers who use services within self-service all the time. It means they won't have to go specifically to the services page, find the service using the search facility or the favourites that are listed in there. They can just go in straight from the home page and use and interact with the services that they interact with the most often. So that's the services page. If we take a look at how the services page looks on a mobile device, so the services page, this is how it looks like on an iPad. It looks exactly the same. The only difference is obviously the nav bar, you remove the text from there and the buttons become bigger. And the text is removed and the buttons become bigger on the filter buttons across the top in the search well. And again, if we go to a smaller device, we can see everything moves itself in nicely, and the services are all displayed in a nice list in that sort of sense. So if I just come back out of that view, what we'll do now is we'll just have a quick look at the wizards. Now the wizards are still very much in development. They do work to an extent, and we can move between stages and actually raise requests from it. But if you see any error messages or it doesn't respond to how we expect, then obviously it's still very much in development. So for instance, if we're on the home page and I've just logged in and I want to say that I've got a problem with one of my Office applications, I can just click on to raise an incident against the Office application. You can see that the self-service wizard for this particular service is launched for the incident class. So the wizard pages, we've got some information up at the top. This is the wizard name and this is the wizard description. So these are obviously set within the wizard itself. And This pane here is actually the stages. So when we move between stages for this particular request in this wizard, you'll see that the content of that particular panel changes. And the panel on the right is what's known as an accordion panel. So you'll see the stages, the stage names, and the stage questions will start to appear as we navigate through our stages. So in this instance, I should mention as well, as it's still in development, there's only 2 input controls currently that are on here. There's a single line text and a multi-line text, but obviously all of the controls that are available in the current self-service will be available, plus a couple of extras by the time this is released. So I'm going to say, right, I've got a problem with Outlook. So Outlook's not working for me. You can see the submit button is disabled. I can't click that yet because I've not provided the information to be able to log the request. So if I hit next, you can see the content of this panel changes. So it's now asking me to select the area that I'm having issues with. And you can see the information pane for the first stage has been shrunk, and we've got a new information pane here, which asks us for more information depending on the questions that are listed at this particular wizard stage. So I'm going to say my sending emails doesn't work. So if I hit next, you can see the content changes, and again, those information that shrinks and the new information for the new stage then appears. Am I connected to the LAN? Yes. And again, we've gone to the final stage now. So you can see in the final stage, the next button becomes disabled, and because we don't need to add any more information, there's nothing else that's mandatory. We can actually now submit this request, or we can add some more information in this, and we can navigate through the wizard backwards and forwards as we see fit. So it was working yesterday, stopped this morning. So we can see the information as we start typing the information here, it gets relayed over to these panes. If I decide actually I want to go back and amend some of my answers, we can do that with the previous and next buttons. So we can go all the way back to the beginning. And as you see, as we're moving through these particular panes, the display on the right hand side changes, so we can see what we've input. And I'm going to put no in there. So I'm not connected to the LAN anymore, and that information is saved. If a customer wants to go straight through to one of these stages that they've already been passed, they can actually go straight to the stage, and you can see it updates on this side as well as updating on that side. So we'll go to the more information, and I'm happy with all the information I've provided to this wizard. So if I hit submit, the request then gets logged. I get a nice information pane up here that gives us the reference number, and the wizard actually takes us directly to the incident page that we just logged. So these are all the details we've just entered. So this is the information we've entered against this particular wizard. As you can see, the questions are prefixed as they are in the existing web self-service if the prefix checkbox has been ticked. And that is wizards in a nutshell. So what we can do is, as well as providing wizards against particular services, we can also provide a default support wizard as you can in the current self-service, and that's driven behind the Raise New Support Request button. This wizard is specified in a configuration file that sits within your web self-service on your server. So if I hit Request a New Support Wizard, there's only one stage in this support wizard. It's going to ask us for certain bits of information, and when we submit that, it'll raise a request, or it'll raise an incident on the back of what we've specified in the wizard. So in the summary, we're going to put, this is a support request test. This is a wizard. These 2 fields here aren't mandatory, so I'm not going to bother filling them in this demonstration. If I hit submit, we can see it logs the incident with the information that we've requested as part of the wizard, and it takes us straight onto the incident details page. So one thing, a couple of things that I've not covered. If I go back into request and have a look at the request view itself, I don't think we had a look at this one in a mobile device. So if we just toggle that to a mobile device, you can see the page is completely rendered accordingly to the device that you're on. So on an iPhone 6, this is how the incident page will look. We've got the update pane up at the top. We've got the tabs, so we can then look at affected items, attachments, and request details. And that information is all there accessible. Again, if we go on to an iPad, we can see the information is displayed accordingly. And again, if I was to, let's go back to an iPhone, and if we have a look at the wizards, so if I open up the Support Me, we can see the wizard is then displayed nicely, and it's all sized according to the device screen size and resolution. And again, we can just put some information in here. And we can submit that. We can see the information gets populated down at the bottom. We can see that's the information we've just added. And if I hit submit, it again takes us to the incident page. We get the nice message up at the top. Excuse me. And we have all the buttons accessible to us as we would on a normal device. And that is everything from me. Oh, well, sorry, I'm forgetting. That's my fault. Branding. So within self-service, within the current self-service, you're probably aware that branding was sometimes a bit of a nightmare. Branding required us to go in, or us or yourself to go in and write some CSS and update probably about half a dozen separate PHP scripts to be able to cater for different colours, different logos, and a different login, all of the branding, all of your customer branding. In this instance, we don't need to do that. So if I was just to log out, obviously we've got the login page now. So what we can do, as I said, we can change the page behind here. So this image here, we can change this text and this text, and we can change this logo as well as some of the colours within the application itself. So I'm just going to jump onto the server, and I can show you how these brandings are made. So within Web Self-Service, we have a file called branding.js. Now this is where we specify the login title, the subtitle, the image that sits on the logon page, the top left-hand corner logo image, plus some colours that are specified within the application. So your primary panels and your default panels, and the circle that's on the title of each of the pages that you navigate through. So if I was to, I've already set up a config in here. So if I remove the existing branding, and we'll call that old, we'll add new branding, which we've just set up. We'll refresh this page, and you can see we've got some different images in here for the login page. We've got some different text, and we've got some different colours from within the application. So if I was to head back to the application and refresh, we can now see we've got a different logo in the top left-hand corner. We've got a different image that sits behind the logon page. We've got a different title, and we've got a different subtitle as well, which can be obviously company specific. If I log back in, we can see the page looks a little different. We've got different colours for the title icon. We've got different colours across the top pages, and we've got different colours across the panels as well. And then when we start looking at request pages, etc., you can see these panels become a different colour. And that is branding. I think we're pretty much done. I shall hand over for questions.
That's wonderful, Steve. Some really exciting stuff in there. I'm glad to see a lot of effort gone into that. It's very good indeed. What we'll do now is if we quickly go back to PowerPoint, we'll come on to, if you like, the questions. And I think there are a few of these which you have already been putting online. So I'm just going to pause for a quick moment and bring those up so I can have a look through the questions. Okay. So just going through these pretty well in sequence. They've covered some of these. Is a bit of an overlap, obviously, with the questions. So we'll just take you through something maybe answered by previous questions, if you like. The first question is, does it work on iOS and Android? It's basically a website. It's not an application, so hence it's not dependent on a particular device you're working on. As Steve demonstrated, if you do reduce the screen size, if you do work it either on a desktop, different screen size, and on mobiles as well, it will render that screen. I think the technical term is responsive to a particular screen, so it will then work within that particular device. But as I say, it's not an application as such, it's actually a browser. It's the full browser utility which is using within that, that device. The next question is to do with the number of services and about, if you like, the levels of categories. So you don't necessarily want just one list, but you want to be able to see top levels. If you've got IT services, facility services, different aspects, the way you want to break that down. That's something which, again, you can obviously do in the current self-service, so it's something we can put into this as well. So you can do those, will respect those categories you create within the full client. Next question is to do with being JAWS compatible, and this is for people who are sight impaired. What it does effectively, it reads some of the information in the web page that's potentially not displayed, but it helps them to navigate through and to find the particular fields. We've done some initial work on that and some investigation, and it's looking fairly positive that we can put that in. We'll need to do a little bit more in there just to confirm the different areas where that can go in, but hopefully that can go into some place that you have some compatibility there. So it's not fully confirmed at this stage, but we are hopeful that we can put something in place to enable that JAWS compatibility or a different screen reader compatibility in there as well. So next question about the versions, what versions compatible with. So a lot of the thing, and certainly if you were there at the user group roadshows at the end of last year, a lot of the work has been done lately to build up core services to latest components, latest platform things. As Steve mentioned at the start of this, again, it's pretty well a rewrite of the functionality that's using the newer technology. And a lot of the reason behind that is to provide things like the responsive nature on the different devices. There were previous ones we looked at. We looked at putting a different, if you like, a visual layer on the old self-service. It all became a rather, shall we say, complicated from a development perspective, which invariably means more complications down the line. So we took the decision to take the opportunity, if you like, to put in a new system, to put in new features, functionality on that, and that will then come through. So you've got the the new features, how that's going to work. So it is going to come out with ITSM 4.2. You're probably aware we've got 4.0 out, the 4.1 will be coming out shortly. 4.2, we're scheduling that for fairly early on in Q3 of this year, so we're probably looking around July for that to come out. And it will require that ITSM application version 4.2. The reason for that is that there's, again, an overlap of functionality going into the application itself. There are things, again, we're saying about to cancel a call. Those sorts of things need a little bit of work within the application. And there are other things we're looking at too, in terms of the passwords and a bit of security aspect about how they're stored. So some things require the platform side, some things require the application side as well. So it will be from version 4.2 onwards to utilize the new updated self-service. The next question, there are a few questions here to do with, if you like, the overall wizard, going through that as effectively a shopping cart approach. The first is to be able to save the wizards partway through. That's certainly a valid request. It's something we've looked at before about being able to do some things along those lines. It's not something that's going to be in the first release of it. It's something we'll keep on the list as something to look at in further releases. But the initial release is going to respect pretty well what we've got in the current system. There is a reasonable way we can put it in and still get the release out in a timely manner. Then we will do that. But as I say, that's more likely to come in a further release to do with the saving of the wizard questions. So the next one is to do with a shopping style basket to log multiple service requests at once. Again, it's something which has come through before, and effectively this is, if you like, batching up service requests. That would require some changes within the, if you like, the overall application to enable you to, if you like, batch a few of these. So if we take a scenario of raising a new starter request, that could go off to one department to get the, the hardware involved, laptop, whatever it happens to be, another department to get network accounts set up, another department to do other particular aspects to facilitate the whole process. And it's certainly feasible that instead of all of those following through with just different tasks, there'd actually be individual service requests going through. There are other scenarios as well, which I understand it could be fall into that category of logging multiple service requests at once. So again, not particularly within this version, but it's something we do have on the list, and we can consider that going down the line. The main focus on the initial release of this is to effectively replace the functionality you've got within your current self-service and obviously building on that to give the, if you like, a technology that we can add these new features to, but also at the same time providing things about the responsive nature of the different applications. An awful lot more refreshed and updated, and I certainly hope you like the new look and feel of it. If you do have comments on that, certainly make them within the forums or let us know. But I hope you agree that it is a much more pleasant place to be. It's a much more enjoyable place to go through, raise requests. You can see the diary updates as you go through. It's a lot less clunky. It's a lot more fluid, a lot more flowing in terms of people actually using the system. The next question about how customers will be supported to move from the current version of self-service to the new. Fairly similar to in previous scenarios, and this steps aside a little bit from the self-service more into where the application is deployed. So whenever we have a new version of the application, it effectively gives you all of the new files for the self-service, but it doesn't change any of your live instances of that self-service. I'm not going to simplify it too much, but to give a fairly high level, it's a matter of copying the contents of one folder into another folder. Maybe some other steps involved in that, some basic configuration in there, but it's largely the same sort of steps you've been provided with before if you're updating from a 360 to 361, for example, taking a new self-service and copying that through. So that process should be fairly familiar to those of you who have been going through and doing that before. It's just a little bit of administration on the server to come through, and then that should be coming through in terms of your live visibility to your customers. You're asking about customizing the names of the buttons, etc., the services to support me. That's something we can consider putting in. Again, it's not going to particularly be in the first version, but if it is something we can put in fairly straightforwardly, we'll put that in. One thing which Steve actually took you through with the branding thing and showing you a little bit of the area in which you do that, we are considering putting, if you like, an administrative user interface over that, and that will then be extended to do things if you've got the different buttons to go in to say this is renamed, or different things are going to come in, be displayed, obviously the color schemes, etc. in there. Some people love going into these wonderful HTML codes for the colors. Other people just want to choose, it's got to be this particular shade of blue, that particular shade of red or green, etc. So a few of those things we can consider by putting into, if you like, an administrative area within the system, but that's probably going to be a little bit further down the line. It's a question about service alerts coming in. One of the features which we've talked about before and we're putting in as well is, if you like, enhanced notification. So firstly, the existing things, if a service is unavailable, it's faulty, etc., those can come through. We'll be presenting those. There are a few areas that Steve mentioned on the home screen. We'll be able to put those alerts onto that. So if someone logs in, they'll immediately know there's an issue with the connection to a particular off-site office. Those kind of things, again, if you present those, you can control those, but the enhancements to that are along the lines of, if you like, ad hoc notifications. So you may have a company meeting coming up, which may mean that some of your staff aren't as available, so there might be a little bit of change of the service you're providing in terms of responses. So you may want to put a note up saying we're company meeting unavailable, we may have a bit of a delay in response. Things like that, which aren't anything to do with a particular service or anything else specific, it's just a general notification, you can put those out. It all helps with that communication back to your customers, giving them the up-to-date, they know what's going on. They're not then going to start, if you like, raising requests and contacting you by all the different methods they can. Again, a question about the different devices it will work on. As I mentioned earlier, this will be coming through as a browser. So if you've got a Windows device, if you've got BlackBerry, etc., provided they've got a browser, which I'm sure all of these have these days, that's fine to work on each of them, then it should render this particular one. We'll obviously be doing checking through on the fairly common ones. If you do have different ones which, for whatever reason, don't quite render correctly, then obviously we'll need to have a look at that. But as I say, it is a website. It's the same as going any public-facing sort of website. It's being responsive to cater for the different screen size. So as long as the phone's got the capabilities on the recent browsers to handle that, then that should all be operational on the different mobile devices. A question about an offline use. The quick answer to that is no. This is one of the challenges which comes up to do with the way Supportworks as a whole operates. If you have something coming offline, somebody puts an update to that, they could immediately be, if you like, out of date, out of step, There could have been other actions going on. They're applying to something which is no longer valid, etc., etc. The whole part of the Supportworks with the call management aspect is down to a transactional basis. Something happens, when it happens is pretty important, just as much as exactly what particular things are happening. The catering for offline is a separate requirement which we're not looking to put in place. So it is just an online website for you to look at to get that customers connected through with the new features and look and feel in there. Mentioning about the profile section, what will be available for customers to do within that area. Again, we're going to represent most of what we have within the current self-service. It'll be picking up things about their department, phone numbers, etc., basic contact details. There'll be other things I mentioned about some of the things coming in within the application to reflect things about, a password reminder, for example. We're going to look at that in terms of how it's going to be presented, because once you talk about a reminder, you talk about the actual password coming through, which obviously has certain security implications. So the things there would probably be enhanced, but those are the kind of things coming in within the profile area. So if you look at your current self-service, it's going to be fairly similar in terms of the functionality to that, obviously presented differently in a much more up-to-date way, and we'll have probably a couple of slightly different routes with some aspects, but generally the same as what we have at present. Another question to do with the what determines the SLA. The functionality behind that is going to, within the self-service piece, basically reflect what you've got at present. In other words, a lot of those things to determine the SLA are based on how you generate the service. That premise, that isn't really changing. What we are adding to, and this is digressing from self-service, but going into the 4.1 release, you've seen various newsletters hopefully to indicate about the service level agreement rules. Those will come in and give you a lot more control over the defaults, if you like, when logging those requests. So that's something which is to do with within the application, within the client logging in to do that. As far as the customer is concerned through the self-service, then it will be a case of you create the service, you define within that how they subscribe to it, what SLA is attached to that. So that functionality is not really changing. So that's the same going forward as it is at present. There's quite a lot of flexibility within that, and again, you control what your customers are provided with, and hence what service, etc., service level agreement they're asking to that. A couple of questions to do with release dates. I mentioned before, we're planning for this to come out within July of this year, so that should be coming out again fairly soon. You've seen an awful lot of the work that's gone into it at present. There are obviously a few more steps to put in place, but an awful lot of work is quite a way down the line. We obviously need to go through the rest of the development side of it, and then we've obviously got the test phase on that. So that should be coming out within the 4.2 release, which is looking at very early on in Q3 of this year. And again, just to reiterate, there's a question about what version that's, what version of Supportworks, so I read the question correctly, the version of Supportworks that it comes with, it actually comes with the application version 4.2. There may well be a reliance on the Supportworks version, but again, the upgrade of Supportworks is basically going through a next when you're on the 8 stream. So if you've got 8.0, then you can upgrade to 8.1 fairly straightforwardly to get that. And obviously the application, provided you haven't gone down to customization, you should be able to generate that or get that latest release within the application. So it's within ITSM application 4.2, and it will at least need Supportworks 8.1. It may well need a next release of that, but again, we need to confirm some of those details in there. Asking last sort of question on the list is to do with the fields. What fields can you hide? For example, the SLA and fixed time. That's one of the things which, again, Steve mentioned with the controller configuration. Whenever you're looking at a request, you've got a list of the fields on the right-hand side, and there's configuration control over that. Those, as I say, currently through files, turning things on and off at present, but we'll look at putting in sort of an admin layer to cover that particular one. So that covers the questions. I'm just thinking if there's anything else. I don't think there's any specific thing that we would like to highlight at this particular point. Again, thank you very much for all of your time. Thanks for all of your questions. I'll be taking these away and make sure I've got the various notes of them, which will be useful for obviously both this release and also for features to put into future release. So thanks again for all your time. If you do have any suggestions, please come through and let us know about those. And if we just go on to a particular slide, which will hopefully show you the links in terms of the different channels to put in the information there. The forum's the best place. If you've got the feature request, if you've got the different ideas, bring those up in the forums. It allows more people to get involved, more different ideas and input, and we can get back to you on the different points in there as well. So thanks very much for your time. Appreciate that. I'll hand back over to Ruth.
Thank you, Dave and Steve, for taking us through that presentation. I hope everyone found it useful. If you have any additional questions, please do not hesitate to contact me or your relationship manager. The recording will be made available on the customer forum through the Supportworks YouTube channel shortly. Finally, thank you everyone for your time today. We're looking forward to seeing you attend the next Supportworks Academy on the 16th of June. We'll be hearing about Supportworks service level agreements from Mary Onikan. Thank you and goodbye.